Hi, welcome to Chapter 4, Differences in Culture. This is Professor Nugent for yet another wonderful lecture. Um, we're going to talk today about culture and culture throughout the world, understanding different cultures and its relationship to business and business practices. Um, you know, there in the previous chapters we talked about differences in political systems, economic systems, legal systems, um, the costs and benefits and risks associated with these different systems. However, in this chapter, we're going to look at culture in a variety of countries and cross-culture literacy, where we're trying to understand another culture's values and procedures and actions and reactions. And we want to understand how cultural differences across nations can affect the way business is practiced. Um, in today's age of advanced global communication and Skype and cell phones and computers, um, the speed of transport, the ease of airfare, the low cost of shipping and airfare, worldwide market, global brands. So we're living in what they call a global village. And it seems like you're never that far away from any other particular place in the world. And it's easy to forget just how different various cultures, can be across the world. Um, you know, if you look in the textbook and you read the opening case, they talk about Walmart's failure in Germany, which was due mostly to them not understanding the cultural differences and trying to apply a very American culture and practice into a German society. Appointing American managers with no international experience who don't speak German, who aren't familiar with the German culture, no interest in really learning or dealing with German culture or some of the German employees of Walmart. Um, so imposing their very American way of managing onto its German employees without making adjustments for the cultural differences. The Walmart soon failed quite miserably in Germany, and to the point that they had to pull out completely. So it's important. You can see how it's important to understand how business is done in foreign cultures and what they find offensive and acceptable and things of that nature. So throughout this chapter, we're going to discuss, um, you know, how culture plays a role in business, the cost of doing business in different countries or regions, and some of the cultural differences um, that can affect a person's attitude. Some cultures are less supportive of a capitalistic modality, and other cultures are more individualistic. Some are more group-oriented. So all these, are key clues to how to be successful in these different um, regions of the world. And it's not culture isn't a fixed or static entity. It changes. Culture can evolve and change quite dramatically in many countries across the world. Even in the country in the United States, you know, when I was growing up, if you would have told me that gay people would be accepted and gay marriage would be legal, and that marijuana would be legalized or encouraged for medical purposes, I would have thought that that was impossible because it was not in our culture to be accepting of those two things. But today is a vastly different culture in the United States. Um, I think in the past, the United States, the culture was institutions and government and corporations would take care of us and provide us jobs and opportunities. And then that culture slowly changed throughout the 90s and the 2000s, where more of a feeling of you're on your own, and companies aren't going to necessarily look out for you or provide benefits or a high competitive salary, you know, just because you work for them. And the government isn't going to be there in every instance to back you up or support you. So, the culture of um, that aspect of culture in the United States has changed also. Um, so, I mean, if you do look around the world, culture is converging because of the you know, the export of cultural ideas. And if you look at American ideas and businesses like McDonald's, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Coca-Cola, you could see that, you know, the acceptance and the consumption of these products have spread throughout the world. So it's not necessarily um, a drastic change in culture. However, it could be a change in culture. If you had a society where dinner is always prepared and consumed in the home, and slowly fast food restaurants are making it very easy and convenient to consume meals outside of the home, that's a change in culture. So a little bit related. So let's talk about a couple of definitions of what culture is. I mean, culture is it's not. No one's ever been able to make a really simple definition of culture. There's a lot involved in what culture is, and but basically, it's a system of values and norms that are shared among groups of people that, when taken together, constitute some sort of design for living. So when we talk about values, um, they're sort of the bedrock of the culture. You know, when we talk about American values or religious values, they provide the context which a society's norms are established and justified. That may not, you know, that may include a society's attitude towards such, you know, towards concepts of, you know, individual freedoms, democracy, truth, justice, honesty, loyalty, social obligations, collective responsibilities, role of women, love, sex, marriage. You know, so values are not just abstract concepts; they are invested and considered with considerable emotional significance and value to people. People hold these very dear, and they mean a lot to people to follow them and stay true to them. Um, so they can be reflective of political, economic, or economic systems within a society. Um, Now, within within the values, we have something called norms, which are more like rules or social rules that govern people's actions towards one another. So social norms can be subdivided into two major categories: um, folkways and mores. Folkways are routine conventions of everyday life. Generally, folkways are action of little moral significance. Rather, they are a social convention concerning such things as appropriate dress code in particular situations such as funerals, weddings, um, social gatherings, good social manners, you know, not chewing with your mouth open, washing your hands before dinner, eating with the correct utensils, um, having knowing the correct subject matter to talk about during dinner. You know, for example, talking about your bowel movements is not an appropriate topic for dinner time. Um, Neighborly behavior, and neighborly behavior, especially in the United States, has changed quite a bit. When I was younger, neighbors were more involved with each other's life, knew each other's first and last names, and were involved or invited to different events in you know, each other's parties and different things like that. And today, neighbors are more standoffish. I mean, I've had neighbors for years, and I barely know their first names, have no idea of their last names, and don't really have much of a reaction to them at all. Um, but there are certain things I do to be a good neighbor. For, you know, things like bringing my trash cans, don't make a lot of noise, loud noise, or have a lot of loud parties. Don't, you know, try to keep up the appearance of my property. Those are some neighborly social norms of today. Um, so it kind of defines the way people are expected to behave, and the violation of them is not a huge, serious matter. For example, if you let your grass grow a little bit longer than it should, it's not a serious matter, but it's kind of inconsiderate to your neighbors. Um, you know, and people who routinely violate this folk ways may be thought of eccentric or ill-mannered or, you know, not usually considered evil or bad. They just are not fitting into society. You know, such as the person who says what's ever on his mind, no matter how rude it is, and doesn't really think about other people's feelings. You know, that's a folk way, is to really be considerate of what you say about other people, and not try to put them down or make them feel bad. And some people don't always understand that. Um, and folkways, concerning attitudes towards time, is very different in many countries. For example, in Germany and Britain and the United States, time is a very critical matter, and you need to be on time. For example, if there if there's a business meeting, you need to be on time. When if you're going to the movies, you need to be on time. If you want to get on the airplane or take the train, the schedule fills a very exact on-time schedule. So when you go to meet someone for lunch, you meet them exactly on time, and that's considered courteous. And people get quite upset when they're kept waiting, or an associate is late for something. But that's not how it is in the rest of the world. In other cultures, and maybe in Arabic or Latin or African cultures, time is a little bit more elastic. Um, so keeping a schedule is less important than finishing your interaction with people. So if you're at a particular party or at lunch, you don't leave early to make your next event on time. That would be considered rude. You stay to the current social interaction is over, then you move on to your next date. And people are accepting and aware of this, and um, so it's not a big deal to show up 15 minutes late for a meeting. So, a movie theater may start a movie 10 or 15 minutes late in these cultures. Um, and in these cultures, especially in Latin American cultures, the executives are people, they're not trying to show any disrespect. Um, due to a mutual misunderstanding of the importance of time, many Americans have difficulty dealing with business associates who are chronically late. And everybody, even in today's American society, um, our classes start on time. It's frowned upon if you come in late. Um, it starts in the classroom setting. Time is essence. We start on time, end on time. But in many other cultures, it's not so critical. And we all have that one friend that's always late. I have this one friend that's late for everything. So what I do is I always tell them that the event is starting half an hour earlier than it really is. So if it's going to be a 5 o'clock start time, I tell him 4:30, and then he usually winds up on time, although mad that I lied to him, and then catches on to the fact I make things a half an hour early, and he shows up. He pads it into his timing, so now I have to go back a full hour to get them to appear on time. So it's a constant game here. But anyway. Folkways include rituals, um, symbolic behaviors, within the culture, and they're sort of just a cultural norm. One thing could be, in Japan, the way they present their business card is very critical. It's presented with both hands, um, uh, presented facing the foreign, the written word facing the foreigner, in a very um, detailed manner. And it's considered very important that the person receiving the business card receives it with two hands, reads the business card, and acknowledges back to the other person that they've read the business card, and they're aware of what's said on it. And many times in American culture, when someone gives a business card, they hand it to them really quickly. You grab it. You probably don't even look at it. Put it in your pocket. I mean, and that's considered okay. All right. So mores, um, they are norms that are seen as central to the functioning of society. So these are a little bit more serious. Um, so, for example, such things as um, mores could include such things as um, in society, um, they could be against theft, adultery, incest, cannibalism. So a lot of these mores are often turned into laws or penalties if people cross them. And they're different in all different cultures. In some cultures, um, they have a different set of mores for sexual behavior and conduct, for consumption of drugs and alcohol, and in other cultures, it can be quite shocking to see, you know, uh, um, uh, a person drunk in the afternoon on the street, or someone drinking at at all. I mean, so it's just really up to the culture. All right. Okay, so let's look at society, culture, society, and nation state. So cultures are not specifically limited to one country. There can be many cultures within a country, or cultures that reach beyond a country's borders. So society is some sort of group of people that share a common set of values and norms. They are bounded together by this common culture. So there is no strict um, correspondence or correlation between society and countries. Um, so countries are more political creations, and sometimes a country can include many different groups of many different cultures together. Um, if you look at the United States, there's the United States culture, but there's also many subcultures within the United States, and many cultures of from other countries of groups of people who emigrate to the United States as well. Um, you know, you have countries where, such as Canada, you have an English-speaking culture, a French-speaking culture, and a Native American culture, the Inuit. So these are three vastly different cultures that coexist within one country. Um, all right. So let's see. What determines culture? So when we're talking about cultural aspects, values, and norms, um, they just don't appear fully formed. They evolve through time, and in response to a number of um, factors that a group of people may uh, deal with or have to work through. Um, you know, they can include political, economic philosophies, history of the culture, social structure of society, religions involved, language, educational norms. Um, philosophies can clearly influence the value system of a society. I mean, if you look at, freedom and justice, individual rights and achievements, they're different values found in the United States than in other countries around the world. Because society operates according to different political and economic philosophies, this transitions into um, society's culture. And here are some, in a graphical display, some determinants of culture. Of course, religion is a big factor, political philosophy, and even in the United States, we have a Democratic and a Republican parties who have different philosophy and express a different culture. Economic philosophy, we talked a little bit that in previous chapters, education, language, social structure. These are all things that help form cultural norms, value, and a value system. Okay. So let's talk about um, social structure. A social structure refers to um, the basic social organization of a group of people. So although social structure consists of many different aspects, two dimensions are particularly important when explaining differences among culture. The first is the degree to which basic unit of society organization is either more towards an individual structure or a group structure. So Western societies and North American societies tend to emphasize the individual, where groups are a bigger emphasis in many Asian societies. Um, the second dimension is the degree to which society is stratified into social classes or castes. So social societies are sometimes characterized by the degree of social stratification, and you can have upper, middle, lower classes that are all going to contribute to the culture of that class and the culture of the society in total. All right, so let's talk about groups a bit. So group is an association of two or more individuals who have a shared sense of identity and who interact with each other in a structured way on the basis of a common set of expectations about each other's behavior. As human beings, we're very social. So we like groups, and group life is a part of um, our everyday life. So as individuals, we're involved in many groups. We have families, work groups, social groups, um, student educational groups, recreational groups. Um, so groups are, and they're found in all societies and differ according to the degree of which the group is viewed as its primary means of social organization. Sometimes their groups are formed by age or sex, and you could have, um, a male bowling league or a female softball team. Um, so membership is sort of a very important aspect of the group. All right. Now, the individual, if you have a more of an individual philosophy, uh, which we call individualism, it's more than just an abstract political philosophy. In many countries, the individual is the basic building block of a social organization. Um, so the way people perceive themselves and how they relate to each other in a social and business setting starts at the individual level. So the value system of many Western societies, for example, emphasize individual achievement. And, you know, what awards have you gotten? What degrees do you have? Where do you work? What's your family like? The social standing of these individuals are not so much a function of who they work for, uh, um, as of their individual performance in whatever work they choose. So for in the United States, it's very much when you meet someone, oh, hi, how are you doing? Oh, what type of work you do? It's not so much who you work for, it's what's your job title. You're a lawyer, doctor, manager, accountant, finance person. It sort of defines your individual character and also can define what group you're involved with. So this is beneficial and could be as its benefits and drawbacks. For example, in the United States, the emphasis on individual performance finds expression in, in a culture of independent people with entrepreneurial spirit. And the benefit of this is a higher level of entrepreneurial activity in the United States that resulted in many new businesses and products and different ways of doing business were created, such as VCRs, DVD players, personal computers, photocopiers, computer software, computers, biotechnology, supermarkets, big box retailers. So the United States economy is really a very dynamic playground of individual ideas and philosophies. Um, now, one drawback of all this individualism in the United States is that people aren't tied to one job. They don't have as much job loyalty, and there's a lot more mobility between people and the companies they work for. So moving from company to company may be good for your individual pay and the skills you're trying to build and possess in a good resume, but it's sometimes a lack of loyalty and commitment to individual companies and a tendency to move off to a better offer can result in managers who have good general skills but lacking the knowledge and experience um, and network of interpersonal contacts that it takes to be successful within a company or organization. So, think of it from a company's point of view. We hired this person, we trained them, we paid for their college. They're very important. They have a lot of history with the company, a lot of knowledge, and now they're leaving to go to another employer. Where that's going to hurt the company because now we're going to have to reinvest in somebody else. So it does, the longer people work for companies, the more useful and beneficial they become. And in today's individualism in American society, people move on to jobs pretty quickly. I remember when I was in high school, they said you'll most likely have 2 or 3 jobs after high school. And that would be considered, you'd be lucky if you had one, but most likely you had 2 or 3. Today, we're telling people you'll most likely have 7 to 10. I've had 13. So things change quite a bit. However, I have been involved in teaching at this current school for the past 13 years. So it's been a long time. But in your careers, I'm sure you've seen um, you've probably switched jobs more than once in the past, and it's not necessarily, and a lot of times it's a good thing. Okay, so let's talk about the group in society. Now, the Western emphasizes the individual. The group is primarily a social characteristic of many other societies. In Japan is a very group-oriented society, and the social status of an individual is determined as much by the standing of the group they belong to as their own individual performance. So the group or the family or the village to which the individual belongs is they're very tied to it. It's a sense of pride and a sense of their identity. And this has, of course, benefits to the Japanese culture and business as well. Uh, I find that, I've taught probably people from every nation on this world at one time or another. And I know that from when people come from countries with high amount of collective group-oriented mentality, that they tend to work closer in teams when they're on teams together. Although, which is the good side of it. On the bad side, there tends to be a little too much collusion in individual work. They can't really separate sometimes that this is an individual assignment meant for you to complete by yourself without help, and they fall back on doing a group effort for even the individual work, which of course is against our academic policies. It's considered academic dishonesty to work together on an individual assignment, and a lot of international students aren't aware of that, and sometimes can cause a problem. All right. Okay. Social stratification. Um, okay. So in society, there's always a hierarchical basis of categories that we can put people in. And this is what we call the social stratification. And the strata are typically defined on the basis of characterizations such as the family you come from, your occupation, your income. Individuals can be born into particular scenarios and social groups that their parents belong into. And, so here we're talking about middle class, upper class, lower class, to be very general. Um, Individuals born into the higher classes, the upper middle class, and tend to have better chance at life and more opportunities than people born in the lower class. They're likely to have better education, live in better areas with less violence, in better school districts, have a higher standard of living, live longer, have better work opportunities, have better networking opportunities with peers. Um, you know, uh, so this we've seen this. It isn't as a huge in the United States where the differences between the strata levels isn't as great as in other countries where there can be a vast difference. Now social mobility is one of the reasons that American society um, is very promising to many people who want to come here because it's very easy for individuals to move out of a lower strata that they were born into or or were involved economically and move into a higher strata. In the United States, it typically takes mostly money, but a little bit of refined um, understanding of the norms, of the folk ways of the upper classes. But it's very possible for someone who is born poor or lower class to become part of the higher society of America or middle or upper middle class. Uh, and the main pathway for people to do that is through education. If you're dealing with a caste system, which is probably most defined in India, it's a closed system in which social position is determined by family into which the person is born. And change in that position is usually not possible during the individual's lifetime. So a caste position carries with it specific occupations. A member of one caste might be a shoemaker, a member of another could be a butcher or a baker, and these occupations are embedded in the caste system and passed down from family member to family member to succeeding generations. Something that we may not be so aware of in this country, but it's certainly in India they're moving away and trying to minimize the caste system because it's really not fair, and it's really not good for an overall productive economy. Now, a class system is less rigid, and I was talking about this before, where social mobility is more possible and generally a motivation for people to improve their lives. Um, so you could be born into one group at birth and change quite easily through achievement or luck, winning the lottery. Um, so individuals born into a class at the bottom of the hierarchy can work their way up, get a good education with government support, get a good job, save money, acquire wealth, acquire assets and capital, and even make it to the top of the hierarchy. And people at the top of the hierarchy can slip downward. You may have, um, your parents may have been the top of the hierarchy, but you chose a different way of life that puts you into a lower class. But you may not even care about that because you may have different values, spiritual values, or other values that are not so um, money oriented, and that so you're not so concerned about what class you're in. All right. Okay, let's talk about religion. Okay, so let's look at the world's most populous religions. So Christianity is the religion with the most followers, followed by Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Confucianism. It's a hard one to say. So we have, these different areas, these different religions of the world that we all know the top religions, and um, in religion is really a system of shared beliefs and rituals that are concerned with spirituality and God and morals and principles and values are all mixed in there to shape the behavior. So a religion is um, crafted out of a belief system in a higher power. Um, and within a religious system, there's many um, rules and cultural observations you have to make and maintain. And each religion, some religions may be similar, some may be totally different, but each has their own demands on their followers. The relationship among religion, ethics, and society is subtle and complex. And among the thousands of religions in the world today, it's definitely prevalent in most people's lives. Not everyone. Um, so I'll do my best attempt at um, reviewing these religions because it's very important to understand. And I myself have studied other religions, and it's very important to understand the values and the social norms of different religions and what they value and different things they're allowed to do or not allowed to do. For example, if you're going to have guests over, you want to understand their dietary restrictions, and you don't want to offend them by offering them food they can't consume. It puts them in a very awkward situation. So it's important for business and even selling products to different religions. There's certain icons and ingredients and things that need to be adhered to. Here's a map of the world's religion, and it's colored by if you have a higher concentration of one religion in a particular area, it wins over the color grouping. So we have a Roman Catholic is prevalent in Western Europe, South America, and Central America and parts of North America, where Protestant is big in the heartland of America and the northern part of Europe, Australia, South Africa. And then the list just goes down, and you could see there's a pocket of Mormonism in the United States near Utah. There is various pockets of different religions kind of around the world that you have your Sunni and your Shia in the Middle East and Northern Africa, Hindu in India. And this is, I think most of us realize this map is nothing new to many people. But let's see. Okay. So ethical systems are a set of morals, principles, or values that are used to guide and shape behavior. Uh, so, so they're related to religion and ethical systems are pretty closely related to each other. Um, so it's under a religion usually includes an ethical code, conduct, or system that members adhere to. So that's why I just want to bring that up first. So if we look at Christianity, um, Christianity is the world's most popular religion. Now why is Christianity the world's most popular religion? And any of the religions of the world, I'm not going to judge whose religion is better or not better, but I would definitely say that religions that involve recruitment as part of their religion, I know Mormonism has, and Christianity uh, has a history of spreading the good news, as they say, and that certainly Western Europe, who came and colonized Central, South, and North America, brought that philosophy, and many monks and priests came over to convert the natives, um, and that's how our religion can grow the number of people involved in the religion. Also through encouragement of their members to have as many children as possible. If you take a religion like Judaism, they don't um, tell their members to go and recruit and accept and try to convert people into Judaism. And you can see that even though it's a much older religion, is a much smaller percentage of the total world's population in that religion than in Christianity because of that basic principle. Um, we look at economic um, results of or consequences of religion, and in Christianity, there's a group of Christians that are Protestant, and they have what's called a Protestant work ethic, and they're encouraged to create wealth and not to be wasteful, and that's generally a helpful force in a Christian, in a capitalistic environment. So, I mean, Christianity is um, I think it has definitely shown that it can go hand in hand with capitalism. And the not just the Protestant work ethic, but generally in Christianity, people are able to engage in business and in interests, lending of capital for interest, and hard work is is looked favorably upon. Um, Okay, so let's move on. I'm not going to spend too much time on each of these religions. Okay, so Islam. Um, Islam is, the second most popular religion on earth. Um, it dates back to, I think, about 600 years, 600 AD or so, where the Prophet Muhammad began spreading the word um, about the religion. Muhammad left Mecca for the oasis. Uh, I think we call it Medina today. And followers of Islam are called Muslims. Um, and they're, mostly in the North Africa and Middle East region of the world. And of course, Islam has its roots in Judaism and Christianity. And even Islam views Christ as one of God's prophets, um, and it's it's similar to Christianity and Judaism as this monolithic religion. Principles of Islam: there's one true omnipotent God, Allah, and Islam requires conditional acceptance of uniqueness, power, the authority of God, and the understanding of the objectives of life to fulfill Um, his will, um, and hope of admission into paradise. And there are many good major principles of Islam: honoring and respecting your parents, respecting the rights of others, being generous, avoiding killing, not committing adultery, dealing justly with others, being pure of heart and mind, safeguarding the possessions of orphans, being humble and unpretentious. I mean, the of these three religions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, to me they seem very similar. They're all a force of good, um, and they try to bring God into people's lives in a beneficial and in a supportive and useful manner. Now, the one thing that's interesting about Islam is that they do not allow um, their banks to charge interest or usury. It's considered um, something you don't do. So the banking system had to evolve to to deal with this, and they've come up with ways where they if they lend money to a business, they become sort of a part owner that can receive some of the profits of the business. Um, so they've come up with ways that their banks can function. And you know what? I kind of agree that the charging of interest is criminal and shouldn't be done. If you and there are better ways to be compensated for sharing capital. And if you look at the student loan, over $1 trillion is owed in student loans, and they want to raise rates that people pay and interest on student loans, and I think that's ridiculous. I think that in the United States should be giving student loans to students in need interest free because the return on educating the population is so great that they're going to get the money back that they invest in these people tenfold through. How does that work? You say, well, it works like this. Hey, government, I want to go to school and become a doctor, or I want to become a lawyer or an accountant. Great, here's some money. Don't worry about the interest. Pay us back when you get a job. You get a job. So instead of working at a low-level job for minimum wage, you're now earning $100,000 a year. You're going to be paying a lot more in taxes throughout your whole life back to the government. So that investment in you may have, they may be foregoing a few $1,000s of interest, but they're going to get back many, many more times that in tax revenue for you being a more productive member of society. So, interest to students, I think, is really a dastardly thing and needs to be immediately revoked. And money should be lent. I mean, the money that's lent to students should be paid back, of course, but we shouldn't be making a profit on student loans to students. It just sickens me. So, okay, let's move on to Hinduism. Now, this is the third most popular religion, and most of them are in India. And they focus on the importance of achieving spiritual growth and development. Um, you know, and what is the impact on business and economy? Since they value spiritual or the attainment of spiritual um, achievements over material achievements, it can sometimes um, not um, be the best match with capitalism. Although I think it does have, I do kind of like this idea of focusing on your spirituality and growing as a person spiritually rather than spending your life trying to accumulate money and material objects. Because the overconsumption of, just look at America. United States is 5 or 6% of the world's population, but we consume 25% of the world's goods and services and energy. That is disgusting. If we led a more minimalist life, there wouldn't be such a strain on the global environment. There wouldn't be such a strain on the value of the price of raw materials and commodities. You know, um, we're getting to a point where we have to share this world and its resources more equitably, and we have to be really just take what we need, um, not take all that we can get type of idea. Also, what I like about this religion is the idea of karma and the spiritual progression of a person's soul and the idea of achieving nirvana. I think these are all very interesting concepts. And okay, moving on. Um, All right. So Buddhism. Now, if we look at Buddhism, I find this to be very interesting. In the I've actually studied Buddhism quite a bit, and it was founded in the sixth century by Siddharth. Uh, I'm not really sure how to pronounce the last name. I don't want to mispronounce it, but an Indian prince who renounced his wealth to pursue a different lifestyle and in pursuit of spiritual perfection. And over time, he did achieve nirvana and decided to remain on earth to teach his followers so they too can achieve this state of spiritual enlightenment. Um, and they have the noble eightfold path for transformation. And it emphasizes the right seeing, the right thinking, the right speech, the right action, the right living, the right effort, the right mindfulness, meditation. So, Buddhism is sort of a very unique spiritual um, organization of thoughts, and it's really like most religions. It focuses on living your life in a truer or more correct or godlike manner um, for the betterment of your spirituality and the spirituality of people around you. Um, so it's quite an interesting religion, and dealing with people, um, who are Buddhists, they may be looking at aspects differently than people of other religions. So marketing to or creating products for Buddhists are going to be different than other religions. That's sort of the point of looking at, all these. But in Buddhism, a business spirit is acceptable. So it's okay to be a merchant or trade. Confucianism, and this is another, um, religion that's looking to um, attain personal salvation through right action. So this, I mean, this is a very old religion founded in the 5th century, um, and it's still prevalent in China today. And it's Confucianism is built around a comprehensive ethical code that sets down guidelines for relationships with others. High moral and ethical conduct and loyalty to others are central to Confucianism. Um, so it has an interesting history unto itself as well. Now, with any of these religions that I went over very briefly, I don't mean to offend anybody. So if I've said anything that is slightly incorrect or not the true nature, I do apologize in advance. Religions can be a multi-layered and faceted organization of ideas and thoughts, and it's a really this isn't a lecture where I'm going to completely explain the all these religions in depth and their relationship to business. But I think as a business person, you should be aware of the 5 most populous religions and have the basic understanding of these religions for the sole purpose as not to offend somebody in another religion. You understand the rituals and the and the societal norms of your religion, and that's fine. But you have to be tolerant of other people's religions, and the more you understand other people's religions, respect them, the more they will respect you, and then the better business you can do. Okay, language. A little bit less touchy of an area, and different countries have different languages, of course, and some countries have many languages. You take that's why as a American traveling abroad, I'm always, you know, astonished at how many languages um, foreign people can speak. Two, three, four, sometimes five is not uncommon. And I'm always quite embarrassed when people find out I can only speak one language. Unless you include the language of love, then that's 2 languages. But just kidding, putting a little humor into the lecture. Uh, well, we have the spoken and unspoken. Those are two definite languages. Now, the unspoken language is a little bit more universal, where the spoken language is a little bit more specific to different groups of people. So it's one of the defining characteristics of a culture, and it's something that combined a culture together. Um, so we have Chinese and English are spoken by the largest number of people in the world. English is sort of the language of international business, which is beneficial to people like me who only speak English. So much of the world's business is conducted in English, and all the air traffic control towers in the world conduct plane travel in English as well. So it's sort of it's the closest we have to a universal language, and it's essential for international business people to learn English because so much of the world's business is conducted in English. And luckily for the world's business, other countries such as China and India and Europe and um, do a really good job in educating their children in how to speak English as a second language. Now, sometimes translation can be difficult because some words in some languages seem similar or close or have other meanings in other languages. And a key, um, I remember the Chevy Nova was a car that didn't sell well in Spanish-speaking countries because Nova meant no go or did not go. So who wants to buy a car whose name is does not go? Or, here they have a funny thing about some product here called Barf. Um, so getting the translation right is critical. And if you ever try to build a piece of furniture from a company that is not well versed in English and they try to make a user's guide in English and it's not transcribed properly, that can make it really difficult for us to follow those directions. Um, so let's go back to the unspoken language. Um, Now, nonverbal cues, facial expressions, hand gestures are a very important um, type of communication. So, different cultures have slightly different nonverbal cues, and can be interpreted very differently and can create misunderstandings. In the United States, we have a lot of aggressive nonverbal cues that can confuse foreigners. Um, And in many countries, simple looks, a movement of an eyebrow, a certain stare, a body stance, these all nonverbal cues that can really tell if someone is feeling comfortable, uncomfortable with you, um, could express much more in some cases than anything you could say. So it's important that you understand the differences in different cultures and these unspoken, you know, you know, um, nonverbal cues. Such as in this picture, we have the OK sign, which I'm told in some cultures, when you make this OK sign, it means asshole. So we could be Americans sitting there saying, "Okay, this is good," and the person's looking at you like, "Did you just call me an asshole?" Um, Putting your feet up on your desk may be acceptable in some cultures. In other cultures, it's very offensive. You know, um, to have such a relaxed stance at work. So there are many more examples of the nonverbal cues that you need to pick up on, and the more successful you are at realizing them and viewing them, the more successful you will be in business. Okay, so moving on to education. Education is another area where um, their differences can occur between society and how society conducts their education. So, formal education is a way for people to learn languages, concepts, mathematical skills, business skills, and it socializes young people into the norms of society and to put them into groups, teach them values and norms. So schools generally teach basic facts about social and political nature of society, and they focus on the fundamental obligations of citizenship and understanding the basic histories and things like that. Um, Now, the educational system between countries can be quite different, you know. And what they do, they focus on training or educational constructs, STEM education, science, engineering, technology, math, um, and what is the educational level that the students are, how long do they go to school for? How many years? When do they graduate? How many days a week? How many days a year? What are the hours? What is the curriculum? All these things can be different between different cultures and different um, societies. Now, generally, the better the educational system of a country, the more effective they are, the better indicator of economic success for that country. So if a country has a high literacy rate, a high university rate of graduation, that generally will mean more successful economic development for that country and more opportunity for its citizens to do well. Now, in the United States, we had a lack of some STEM workers, so we had many engineers and scientists from other countries would come to the United States to work here, and that for a long while really supplemented a softening of the domestic supply of these types of workers. So in the United States, for many years, the immigration policies made it beneficial, and since the economy was so strong, it was very attractive to many individuals from foreign countries to come to the United States, and that helped maintain and prolong and fuel the economic development of the country because we're sort of draining the world of its best minds for an extended period of time. Although today they have tightened up on the immigration policy over the years, and it's been difficult. I've seen many students struggle with the fact that they want to stay in the country and work, but they're asked to leave. And my idea was, and not simply just my idea alone, but that if you earn a graduate degree, a doctorate, or a graduate level degree in the United States, you should automatically be given a visa for 5 years to pursue and work. And then after 5 years, you can be reevaluated that if you were successful and contributed greatly to the economic growth of the country, then you could be considered for a green card and eventually citizenship to promote the economic benefits of having educated people stay in the country and work here. Because we certainly want to have a more educated workforce because it will make a stronger economy. Okay, culture in the workplace. So, does society's culture impact the values found in the workplace? And yes, of course it does. And there are different dimensions that people look at. Or research has been done on what the effect is. You can look at. I wonder if these slides are gonna. Yeah, this slide talks about it a little bit more. If we look at the power distance, and it's the dimension. Focused on how society deals with the fact that people are unequal in physical and intellectual capabilities. A high power distance cultures were found in countries that let inadequacies grow over time into inadequacies of power and wealth. So low power distance cultures were found in societies that tried to play down such inequalities as much as possible. So it basically looks at, is your society supporting sort of stratification of the intellectual capabilities of its citizens? You have a small group of highly intellectually, highly educated people, and then on the opposite side of the spectrum, a number of uneducated, very poor, we're talking not past elementary school level education. So the more you can narrow this power distance, the more equitable the society becomes. And of course, a common theme throughout this lecture, individualism versus collectivism. And these are relationships that we talked about before, individualism in societies versus collectivism, and how that emphasizes in societies, culture, and in turn its economy. Um, Uncertainty avoidance, where the extent at which different cultures socialize their members into accepting ambiguous situations and tolerating uncertainty. Members of high uncertainty avoidance cultures place a premium on job security, career patterns, retirement, and benefits. They also had a strong need for rules and regulations. They like to be um, feel more secure and know exactly. They don't want to have to think for themselves as much. They want things to be spelled out and spoon fed for them. Uh, Masculinity versus femininity, and this is looking at the roles between masculine gender. So masculine cultures where sex roles are sharply de- um, their roles are very much different and their expectations are different. And you have different rules from male genders to female genders. Um, for example, in the United States in the 50s, this was the case where men went to work, women stayed home, cleaned the house, took care of the children, did the cleaning of the laundry and things of that nature. And then through an economic change in the 70s and 80s, women became more equal, and then the role changed. And the big turning point of this was a movie called Mr. Mom, where Michael Keaton gets laid off and has to stay home with the kids, and his wife Terry Garr goes out into the workforce and works. And that was sort of really the turning point in American society, where more and more women entered and stayed in the workforce and contributed as equal parties. And this dimension between genders was reduced greatly, and it's still there. And there's issues of women's unfair pay, and there's still prejudice there. But the society is moving to more of a gender. The American society is moving more to the gender neutral society where men and women have the same respect and rights and the same opportunities. And part of that reason this occurred is the economics of the fact that really most people could not, one salary could not support a household anymore. Both husband and wife had to work to support a family and support a household in the changing economic times, because we're moving from a society where um, the pay for an individual routinely was sufficient to finance a family, where today it's really difficult for one person to finance an entire family. Two people working and earning money is the norm in today's society, and this has really melted away at these gender roles. Um, and then Confucian Dainism captures the attitudes towards time, um, persistence, ordering by status, protection of face, respect for tradition, reciprocation of gifts and favors. So it's another type of cultural idea in the workplace of what is looking towards tradition. Uh, there's a lot of pride in, as far as respect for saving face and your ego and things of that nature. It's just another a way of kind of looking at culture in the working place as far as what's expected of you and what is generally considered appropriate for you to behave. Okay. If we look at these top four things I described before by different country, and this is a scale from 1 to 100, where the higher the number, the more intense, the closer they are to the higher end of the chart. As far as we're talking about power distance, the more distance there is in power between the people of the country from people with the higher educations and advantages compared to the lower. Uncertainty avoidance, the higher on this scale, the more they want to avoid uncertainty. Individualism, the higher on this scale, the more individualistic they are. And you could see, if you look at the United States, we have one of the highest ratings of individualism. We have sort of a lower rating on power distance because of our education system that tries to educate everyone equally and provide good opportunities. The avoidance, uncertainty avoidance is sort of in the middle, where we're not the most risk-taking population, but we still like our securities and do take a certain amount of risks. Masculinity, you can see that the American society is a little bit still male-oriented, where other societies are less male-oriented. Where you could look at a society like the Netherlands or Denmark, where they're a little bit more feminine oriented, and less masculine oriented. So interesting chart of how things of these workplace culture factors are around the world. Um, now, culture changes. Like I was saying earlier, people's attitudes, societal attitudes, and factors change. Their attitudes towards sex and work and children and education and what government should do for them. If you look at the culture of the United States in, you say, the 1800s versus the culture today, there's a big change in what we expect from the government and what the government does for its citizens. So in the beginning, the culture was more of a minimalistic federal government that didn't get in the way of states' rights and individuals' rights. So today we have a more involved federal government. So culture does change in society, in the workplace, and as the world becomes more economically entangled through globalization and more economically stronger, the culture of the world will probably become more similar. But culture will evolve over time, and it's interesting to study how culture in the world has changed through time. Um, okay, so what does this mean as a manager? If you're a manager, you definitely have a couple of things you need to focus on. Um, Managers have to, in today's world, any manager may come into a situation where they're going to have to deal with someone from another culture. So there's a need for management to develop cross-cultural literacy. There's a need for individuals, to self-educate yourself through travel or through reading books or studying history about other people's cultures. There's definitely a connection between culture and the national competitive advantage. Some cultures are a little bit more adaptable to a stronger economic society, a national society. So, in some cultures aren't. So when you come into a culture that is not so materialistic, you can't come at these people the same way as you would a society that's more accepting of a more materialistic view. So you have to be more subtle in the way you sell things or promote things. You can't hit them over the head like a lot of times we do in the United States when we're trying to sell something with those ads of people screaming at us to buy furniture or um, things of that nature. And there's a connection between culture and ethics in decision making. So when someone makes a decision, a lot of that decision is based on their cultural norms and their ethical background. And generally, in my experiences in doing business, the more ethical someone is, and the more they follow the way of truth and honesty in their dealings, the more business they'll get, the more success they'll have in their career. Being unscrupulous and unethical may get you some short-term goals, but long-term it's going to penalize you. Just like many of these companies that took shortcuts in putting melamine in cat food or in baby formula or lead paint on toys or taking shortcuts with the quality of their ingredients, putting in high fructose corn syrup into their products or hydrogenated oils. It may be short-term profit gaining techniques, but in the long term, people are going to see your company as really not caring about the health of the individual, and they'll move away from that. So um, it's important to remember that. Um, Cross-cultural literacy, um, there are a lot of ignorance out there, and it's really important for a business to be successful that its members of the organization understand other cultures and how to behave appropriately within one's own culture and within other cultures that you may come across. Okay. Um, Now, as far as culture and competitive advantage, if we're looking, um, at this, um, there's definitely a relationship between culture and competitive advantage. Um, the value systems and culture and the norms of any country influence the cost of doing business there. And the cost of doing business in the country influence the ability of firms to establish the competitive advantage in the global marketplace. So if it's a company that's in a country that has a lot of unions, and unions um, competitive with the employers and demand high wages and benefits, you know, and it's accepted as part of society that unions are going to be in the business. That could definitely be a high cost. And in I'm not against unions at all. I'm in favor of unions, but when there's a change in the United States where unions in some states, the right to work states, were de-emphasized and unions weren't as powerful, then foreign auto manufacturers started to move into those states to manufacture cars that normally were manufactured overseas, such as Toyota, Honda, Volkswagen. Because the competitive advantage now, there was a significant competitive advantage, not just with labor, but with also logistics of building the car within the United States, and things of that nature. Um, so we've seen how attitudes towards cooperation between management, labor, towards work, and towards the payment of interest can influence, it can be influenced by societal structure and religion. It can be argued that the class-based conflict between workers and management in a class-conscious society, um, when it leads to industrial disruption, raises the cost of doing business in that society, would be less of a competitive advantage. So, this idea of competitive advantage is businesses are going to look at placing their operations, their manufacturing, their products in countries where it's competitively advantageous for them to move to. So if there's a competitive advantage to build or to make your products in a certain country, you're going to move your production there. If it's a competitive advantage to build your research development facilities where the highly educated workforce is, then companies are going to do that. One of the reasons Long Island has been a profitable part of New York State and a profitable region and an affluent region in the United States is because we have a highly educated and trained workforce on Long Island. So a lot of companies come here, even though the cost of pay is higher and the cost of taxes and doing business is higher, they still like the competitive advantage of the highly educated, highly trained, highly experienced workforce that exists on Long Island that has contributed to the success of many companies. So companies are going to look to move their factors of operation to what's most competitive to them. And culture plays a key role on what areas can be a competitive advantage over other areas. So that's something to think about if you have your own company, or you're managing a company, uh, or working on a product line. So okay, that concludes chapter 4. And I will see you soon for chapter 5.